We should talk about the protests in Iran. These are some of the biggest protests, at least since 2022, with the Women Life Freedom protests. They've now spread to a majority of Iranian provinces. I mean, it began as a kind of economic question. The Iranian economy is a basket case, but it has broadened out into a general anti-regime protest, almost revolution. Claire, the thing that's struck a lot of us is how little enthusiasm there is for this in the West, and even on places like the BBC, the sheer lack of coverage has been really quite striking. When we know they do have reporters who are able to go there. Or
It's so weird, isn't it? I mean, this is like a genuinely inspiring movement. I also have been tracking, for obvious reasons, the bravery and the courage of women pulling off their veils over recent years. And that also doesn't get very much in the way of support. I mean, there's all sorts of potential explanations, but, we have to remember that in the West, Khomeini and the revolution against the Shah was welcomed and greeted by liberal characters.
Yeah.
And the Iranian support for those forces that are anti-Israel has to come into the factor. I mean, there is there's something about criticizing Iran that has become synonymous with somehow being pro-Israel. And I do suspect that there's a kind of element of the BBC going, oh, we're not quite sure. I thought it was hilarious when John Simpson proclaimed that the reason why they weren't able to speak out about the protests in Iran was they didn't have anyone on the ground, and therefore they couldn't assert what was happening. You think, just hold on a minute, you haven't got anyone in Gaza and you never shut up asserting what was happening on the ground. Even if you did get that information from Hamas sources, you were still happy to put it out there. So there is a discomfort in that. It does look, by the way, as though this is potentially much more significant than just protest movement now, because there's strikes, there's shopkeepers and bazaar holders coming out. It's built every day. Already today, this time today, there's greater activity on the streets than there has been during the daytime because the protests have been at night. I mean, the bravery of these people. And there's a really brilliant little film of a lady with blood streaming down her face. And she says, I've been dead for 45 years, so I'm not afraid.
Yeah.
I want my freedom. I want to be alive. And that's, I think, why it matters. Apart from anything else, it's just a reminder of what freedom is and what having no freedom means. A brutal, vicious Islamist regime has kept people in check and has deprived them of basic rights in terms of women's rights and of the capacity to act as individual and autonomous citizens. And people are now saying, we can't stand this. We're throwing off the shackles. Of course, Iran having a revolution is difficult and it will be destabilizing and there will be scary bits and there could be clampdowns. And the fact that they're bringing in these external forces from Iraq and all over the place is worrying. And of course, I'm sitting there thinking, well, I don't know if I want a king back or the Shah back or whatever, right? It's not like as though you're kind of like enthusiastic for an autocratic ruler. I see, by the way, that the Kurds have come out and said they support the Shah returning. So, you got all sorts of weird and mad things. But basically, people want to get rid of the Islamic regime in Iran. And I can't wait for that to happen on behalf of the people of Iran.
And Tom, there is this reticence to criticize anything that has the word Islam in it, even if it is this obviously brutal theocratic regime that we would never put up with for a second in the West.
You can't help but feel the disjoint between how, say, us three or many people in our world of politics, the tremendous inspiration we're taking from these protests, but how they're leaving a lot of people sort of nonplussed. Even when it is reported on, it's in a kind of quite cursory fashion. It's certainly not inspiring the kind of solidarity that you might expect if this was any other place in the world, if it wasn't wrapped up in the Israel question, if it wasn't wrapped up in the strange almost identity politics, which is now applied to geopolitical affairs, in which people are quite funny about anything with the word Islamic in it. As Claire was saying, this is a tremendous challenge to the authority of the Islamic regime. These, it's theocratic scumbags who've been squatting over great civilization for decades now. And whilst one shouldn't make hasty predictions, whilst one shouldn't be too kind of blind optimistic about what happens next, it's clear that we're in a kind of cycle of protest now in recent years, which is increasingly degrading the authority, if not ultimately the kind of stranglehold that regime has. It's worth noting that during the Women Life Freedom protest, you already start to see certain cracks insofar as a reticence on the part of the security services in cracking down to the full extent. It'll be interesting to see if that is repeated to any extent. But also the broader social base now of the agitation against the Ayatollah is really striking. The fact that the shopkeepers and the people from the bazaars have been at the centre of this is really telling, because that used to be a key support base, or was a key support base in 79 during the revolution. This isn't just about the kind of upper middle class frustrated they can't go abroad as much, or students who are kind of reared on quote unquote Western values and therefore are a slightly different proposition. This is something which is much broader, and it's encompassing the economics, the fact that the place is hopelessly corrupt, that this isn't just about the sanctions. This is a regime that, you know, is lining its own pockets, meanwhile is struggling to even provide kind of water to the various cities in Iran. But the fact that it's so quickly become political, the fact that once again we're hearing chants of death to the dictator, yes, a bit of Shah nostalgia as well, but even that in itself is a damning indictment of how terribly that country has been run, and with such an iron fist. So we all, I think, express heartfelt solidarity, hope that this regime is coming to a close, which would be, if it does happen at some point in the future, would be tremendously significant, not simply for the people of Iran first and foremost, but also for the symbolic and strategic importance of that horrific regime in terms of Islamism across the globe and in the region. It would be such a tremendous blow to that utterly despicable sort of neo-fascistic ideology, which has menaced not just their near neighbours, but large parts of the world over recent decades. So it's hard to it's hard to find the words to describe how significant what is going on there, even if one doesn't want to get too ahead of oneself about what might happen in the immediate future.